mind, body and spirit. It's a bit of a catchphrase at the moment, but it does kind of sum up the kind of holy trinity of wellness. You look after your body and your mind benefits and your spirit benefits. You know, there are well documented benefits to getting plenty of exercise. It's good for your emotional health, it's good for your mental health. Doctors are always talking about getting out into nature, you know, because when we reduce stress, that has an impact on our physical health. And I've known this firsthand. When I've been in stressful situations, I have developed stomach problems. I know other people who get headaches, backache, neck ache, things like this from stress. Our physical body is intrinsically connected to our spiritual well-being, to our mental well-being. Yet we treat them as separate things. So when I get a bad leg, I go and see a doctor who can help me fix my leg. When I get a headache, I go and see a doctor who can give me painkillers or tell me to drink more water. But when I'm suffering from mental distress, I go and see a psychotherapist. And they are separate people. They're specialising in different aspects of that mind, body, spirit trifecta. But they're part of the same thing. We are a whole unit. We're not separate. Mind, body and spirit are very much three parts of the same thing, and they are connected, they're interwoven. And I wanted to speak to someone about this because there's been times where I've been in a meditation, for example, a guided meditation, and the guide has said to me, picture a scene, picture a feeling, picture an emotion, a problem that you're dealing with. Now, where in your body do you feel that? And I've always thought that's a rather strange thing to ask, where do I feel that? But you know, it happens all the time. When we're watching a film, our heart beats faster. When we're in stressful situations, we can start to sweat, start to panic. Our breathing starts to pick up. Now, we have physical manifestations of mental and spiritual states, but often it's seen as woo-woo. Yet, if you look at Eastern medicine, Eastern philosophy, you talk about energy centers, chakras that are in the body and can be kind of connected to our nervous system, the nervous network that stretches out from our brain into our stomachs, down our limbs. You've got your vagus nerve, which is very much connected to your heartbeat and also stress and things like that. So there is a physical connection between our bodies and our minds, and therefore our spirit as well. I touched on this briefly when I interviewed Donna Lancaster, one of the founders of the Bridge Retreat. And she said I should speak to her colleague, Gabi Krueger, who is a holistic therapist. Gabi is well trained in modern Western psychotherapy techniques, but she's also spent time in the East, living in Singapore, where she studied more traditional, older Eastern philosophies. And she's brought them together because there is sense in modern techniques, but there is also kind of an ancient wisdom to all of this. And so I was very lucky to be able to sit down and have a conversation via Zoom with Gabi about this. And she was a fantastic authority on this whole idea of unblocking parts of ourselves physically in order to resolve issues around ourselves spiritually and mentally. Looking at where trauma might manifest itself in our bodies and how we can use physical techniques to clear that trauma. We're in lockdown conditions at the moment, so a lot of us are feeling the strain of having been stuck indoors for a long time. You might hear my little girl in the background, so I'm sorry about any background noise, but it seems appropriate considering I'm recording these in my bedroom at the moment. I don't have access to the office as usual. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to this on. Give us a rating if you like it. And you can also get my book, Shine Manifesto. It's on Amazon now if you want the paperback, or you can get it on Kindle. Or if you sign up to my newsletter, you can get it for free as a download on my website at www.chrisbrock.uk. So here I am having a wonderful conversation with the amazing Gabi Krueger, one of the co-founders of the Bridge Retreat, which is www.thebridgeretreat.com. So Gabi Krueger, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. You are the co-founder of the Bridge Retreat, and I have spoken to one of your colleagues recently, Donna, and she said that you would be a good person to speak to because there's this thing that has come up in a lot of conversations I've had, that's kind of a connection between our kind of our mental selves and our emotional and spiritual selves and our physical selves as well. And I've always kind of known about the mind, body, spirit thing. And I've had conversations in the past where people have said to me, you know, when you think about that, or when you feel that emotion, where do you feel it in your body? And I've always thought that a bit of a strange question, but I guess there is something about listening to our bodies. And Donna Lancaster said that you would be a great person to speak to about this. So maybe you can start me off somewhere. How does our physical self connect with our kind of spiritual and emotional self?
Mm. Yeah, maybe, Chris, I can begin by really starting off how I became interested in this kind of connection in the therapeutic field. And I believe it's often what we have to go through ourselves, and we then really delve into that and we seek healing, and then then sometimes we become really passionate through our own experience. And that's also true for me. So my background is, I always say I'm a German passport holder because I haven't lived in Germany for a very long time. But it's this thing, of course, if you maybe you appreciate, as a German, we are very often seen, we lack in humor. And we also very mind-based, head-based, logical. It's all about logical, making sense, and it has to make sense. So that was also not really any difference in my kind of upbringing. It was all very scientific and all, can you prove it, and that sort of thing. And then, and fair enough. And then when later on in my life, I started to have certain symptoms in my body that couldn't be really diagnosed properly in my anatomy.
So this was a physical illness.
Yeah. So from the age of 14, I started to have migraines. Nobody could explain, right? So it's a typical, often associated as a psychosomatic, symptom. So, and all my life, I have processed my things more psychosomatically, my trauma, my experience from childhood and so forth. And so I was seeking help in the medical field, but obviously they couldn't find the trigger because anatomically, there's nothing wrong with me, right? Yeah. So then that was left to, deal with itself. And there's often sort of a slight connotation, maybe even, oh, yeah, you're a bit sort of mad or crazy or whatever, right? What's wrong with you? And so it was later on in my life when I looked at the connection of that there must be something in my psychology, in my thinking mind even, right, that I'm not processing properly.
Yep.
And then, as it is so often in life, I met some people. So I was already on my therapeutic journey at that time, in my sort of late 20s. And so I was doing all the cognitive healing work, let's say, And we didn't get to the bottom of the migraines and other psychosomatic symptoms that I've had. Unexplainable pain and all that sort of shebang. And then I met some people who said, have you ever really listened to your body? Yeah. By that time, I knew what kind of happened to me in my childhood, trauma and so forth. So I had a little bit of, again, a cognitive understanding of what happened to me. And then, at that time I was living in Singapore, and I met someone, and she was, I was like, you, what, the body, how,
Yeah.
And then she would softly guide me into, okay, the mind is thinking that, this is my thought. How do I feel a resonance of that thought somewhere in my body?
Right.
So at first, to the mind, that makes no sense whatsoever. What, it's a little bit of what you're saying. Suddenly someone says, so where do you feel that in your body? And we're thinking, hang on here, what am I missing? And it is because we are so groomed and we are so conditioned to try to sort everything out with our mind. Yeah. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. Yeah, but
No.
we need to come to a place, especially if we if I'm all happy and content and relaxed and my life is going well, of course, then maybe I don't need to do that. But if I have unresolved issues, if I feel stuck in my life, if I feel even that I'm not really fully living my life, or nowadays we have a lot of anxiety and depression, which is kind of opposite scale, right? It's worthwhile then to go beyond the mind.
Yeah.
We think we can solve everything with the mind, right? Often we do. Yeah.
So, because I mean,
Yeah.
I've been in certain situations where I've been undergoing sort of stress for long periods of time, and that has manifested in stomach problems. And I know other people get back problems and things like this, which are all connected to stress. But is there something a little bit deeper than just you're tense? You know, this is you're tensing up. Is there something deeper going on than just literally, you know, you're tensing your neck or you're tensing your back? How do we listen to our bodies and understand what they're almost telling us? How does that work?
So first we need to understand, you know, the bridge in a way to the entry from mind into body is our neurological system. By the way, I want to apologize if my pronunciation is not always right. So we need to understand how our nervous system functions.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens when we experience a stressor? So the first thing is the trigger, which is the stressor. So that can be a person, that can be a situation. Okay.
Yeah.
Then we need to understand what starts to happen. So I acknowledge that in my mind, this person is really stressing me out. This person, whatever, or this situation is too much for me. I feel fear, maybe. I feel the pending danger, maybe. So it registers first in the mind. Yeah. And then in our neurological system, we find a response in the body.
Okay.
Yeah. So then we need to talk about, so that then creates internal stress.
So
And
this
often,
is a biological function almost.
Exactly.
So we're not talking about something spiritual and mystical here.
No.
This is actual kind of biochemistry going on.
Exactly. Absolutely. We're talking absolutely about biochemistry.
Yeah.
So we need to understand the whole situation around trauma response, and how is that innate in us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later on, we come to the spiritual side of the processing of it all. But ultimately, first, we need to understand our body better, and we need to be able to understand the language of the body better.
Okay. So how do we go about that?
How the body. So let's take an example. I'm in a situation and there is a certain stressor. For me, can I say this? I'm not sure. So there is one person in my life. I won't say who it is.
No, that's okay.
I don't think she would listen to it, but it doesn't feel right.
But
so
it could be. So for a friend of mine, he went through a lot of trauma in a particular town, for example. And now if he goes anywhere near that town, he gets very stressed out and that sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to that, because
Okay.
there's a particular point here. But first, let's say it's in the present moment. I
Yeah.
feel a stressor is coming. So in my case, my example, it's a person that's been in my life for a long time. And she really stresses me out. Psychologically, I can explain that, why that is, because we have a long history together and things have happened. But I still experience her as a stressor in my life. So neurologically, what then happens is that I have a whole set of neurological events happening in my body, right? I have a release of adrenaline, maybe, yeah, or cortisol. I get into activation in my body. My heartbeat may start racing, right? Or I get sweaty hands, or people react in different ways. So suddenly the stressor comes, I acknowledge the stressor in my mind, and my body goes, right, into a response here. Okay. Now let's say the stressor goes away. I come back in a seemingly in my mind, a seemingly calm, relaxed presence again. But very often the body hasn't released that stress yet.
Okay.
And it goes into a holding space because we haven't learned how to release that stress through the body. Does
And
that
then
make sense?
it does make sense. And I'm thinking, so this situation, it carries on. This person comes back into your life. They go out again. They come back in. I mean, it could be a person. It could be a situation. It could be anything like that. And it's repeated over and over. And each time your body doesn't let go. And so the situation for you physically becomes worse and worse.
Mm.
And then that's when you start to get these unexplained medical conditions or unusual feelings or pain or that sort of thing. Is that
Absolutely. So
okay?
yeah, totally. So Chris, when it comes to, of course, and we need to talk about trauma, what it is, and so forth, and the more modern version of what trauma, what qualifies for trauma, and so forth, to understand all these processes. But so we have obviously a distinction between a situational, let's say I've just had an encounter in the supermarket and that person became a stressor, and then I will never see this person again. But nevertheless, so I come back into a more calmer, the stressor is gone, but the stress may still be in your body temporarily in the form of, as you said earlier, tensed up, and you sit on the sofa, you watch some telly, and you have some physical awareness, and suddenly you notice, oh my God, my back is really tense, my shoulders are up. That's what we often do to protect ourselves from oncoming danger, right? And we never release that. We never come down from it. So we need to talk, what do we do physically? What do we need to do physically to release that? Yeah.
So is it something that we have to do physically, a physical, almost like a medical treatment, or is it something that we can do through counseling or through talking therapies? How does it work?
Yeah, it would be nice if we could work through talking therapy, because we have all we can maybe tap on that also, sort of social conditioning around our feelings. But it is really, we need to check out, let's say, so I was in a stressful situation. I'll talk it through first because I engage my mind. I may try to make sense of it. Yeah. Then I look, is there any residue left in my body / my emotional being?
Yeah.
Right. And when it comes to that, I need to learn to release it.
How do you identify it in the first place? How do you know it's still there and it hasn't gone away completely?
So we need to really learn to step a little bit out of the mind, and we need to just go like, all the Asian traditions, actually, they have sort of techniques to really touch into the body, right? It's like the yoga nidra exercises and so forth. They do that. They say, so now feel whatever the palms of your hands, and just maybe you tense them and you relax. Yeah, that's also auto-suggestive. What is it called in English? That technique that does that. Or we say, okay, what are you feeling there? So here we go and see, oh, I have sweaty palms. I wonder where that is. Am I nervous right now?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So then we learn. It's a learning process. In the beginning, the mind will say, what? Right?
So
you know what I mean?
So generally, by the time you get to this point where you're doing these explorations, you know something is wrong.
Yeah.
So you have a repeating unexplained illness or something like that doctors don't know what's going on, and so and it's, I mean, presumably this kind of physical ailment that no one can explain becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling, ever decreasing spiral in itself, because now you're stressed out about this unexplained illness. And then it's getting worse and worse because it itself is becoming the stressor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do people go? How do they know that it's to come to someone like you, for example, to look for that that kind of release?
Yeah. So the first thing I always work with is engaging the mind and letting the person tell their story.
Yeah.
So then maybe I will ask a little bit here and there, but it's cognitive. Yeah. Like say someone has never done anything, any work at all. We gain awareness. Cognitive awareness is the first step always, because without awareness, nothing can happen. Yeah. So in awareness, I I look at what belief did I kind of form around that issue.
Yeah.
Right? Which may be self-limiting belief, right? Like I was called, let's say the whole, because I was a very sensitive child, blah, 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 lots of trauma. And I was always called, I'm too sensitive, I'm a crybaby, so that was a part of my self-imagery that I took on. I believed that I was a little bit oversensitive, or not a little bit oversensitive, and therefore there was something wrong with me. Right? That was the implication, there's something wrong with you. And I totally taken that on. So I needed that kind of understanding first that had happened in my mind.
Yeah.
So that didn't make the migraine go away. It settled my system a little bit, right? I started to see, oh, maybe I'm not crazy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we look into how did all these beliefs maybe manifest somewhere in my body. Right? What's happening to my nervous system? As we said, what am I feeling about being told that I'm a crybaby as a child? Children are all about feelings. So, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, so we're not just storing these traumas emotionally and mentally. We're storing them in our bodies somehow. So it becomes something that is being held in a kind of the way we hold ourselves, or in our posture, or in our gut, or something like that. So it becomes almost like a kind of physical representation of that trauma that's gone before.
But you see, what it is we can't see it as separate, because the emotions, our feelings, they actually are felt through the body.
Right.
Right? They are felt. When we cry physically. There is a physiological process happening when we cry. So it's not really, so I feel sad, I cry. There is a response in my body. Yeah. And as I said, it is through the nervous system that all this gets translated.
So when people say to you, and this, we mentioned this briefly before we started, when a few times people have said to me in different scenarios, when you think about that situation, where do you feel it? Mm-hmm. And I've always thought that's a strange question to ask. And sometimes I have noticed that I felt tension in my chest, or nervousness, or anxiety sort of in my stomach, or something like that. But I guess that's what they're getting at, isn't it? It's like you have a connection here. I was in Indonesia a few years ago, and I went and had a kind of intuitive reading. And I was talking about some things that I was kind of hung up on. And the person who was doing the reading said, I'm going to say a word to you now, and I want you to tell me where you feel it. And sure enough, I felt it here, sort of between she said it was between my heart chakra and my throat chakra. And she said, you have issues about speaking your truth, if you like, because coming from your heart and communication from your throat, which I thought was very revealing. Whatever people think about chakras or Eastern kind of philosophies around kind of your energy and that kind of thing, I thought that was very, very revealing about the state, my state of mind, the state I was in. I mean, is that a similar kind of thing? We hold this energy and this kind of emotional trauma in places where it's almost kind of like relevant.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, it becomes, if it's here, it's to do with our heart, or if it's, I mean, is this how you learn to read it, by kind of where it's manifesting?
I mean, I'm a great fan. I lived in Asia for a long time. Well, not a long time, is exaggerated, for quite a few years in Singapore. And I studied Buddhism and so forth. I'm a great fan of the chakra system. Yeah, because it explains a really old tradition with the very modern psychology. Modern psychology can be explained through the chakra system, and it's a very holistic approach, right? Yeah. So it brings body, mind, spirit together. So absolutely. So here we're leaving a little bit, let's say, the neurological field and the trauma field, and we're looking at places in our body. If I store tension there, right, or I store this ease there, can give us an information about what may be the wounding. or
Right.
what may be the blockage you're holding, the psychological blockage, right? So if
Yeah.
someone says, so I do that often in my work when people are too much in their head and I want to get them more into their body. And then I say, so where, as you said, exactly as you said, where would you feel that in your body? And then let's say someone had a young man today and he said, here between my rib cage. So we know this is solar plexus. Solar plexus is all about self-esteem and personal power.
Yeah.
So we then take that as information. We look and he said, I feel very tight and I feel really like a knot there, right? And I find it difficult to breathe into that space. So then we know, I often use the breath to say, so can you breathe? And he said, no, I can't get it beyond my chest. Yeah, in my imagination, obviously. And then we look into, so what may have happened in his psychology that leads him to feel a lack of confidence, and it's totally his issues that he brings. So then we can look into what happened in his history. And then we know, we say, okay, father was very critical, it was never good enough, and so forth. So then the history made sense to the lack of power he's feeling there. So now we can use certain exercises, through the body to really loosening up that. Then psychologically, I need to do my therapeutic work with the mind in a way and the feelings, which is to grieve that the father wasn't the father that he needed and all of that, if that makes sense.
So in a way, we're looking for kind of blockages, I guess, that we can be released. So, I mean, and this in your solar plexus, that's your agony, isn't it? That's your personal fire, isn't it? That and if you're blocked there, you feel very powerless,
Exactly.
no control over your own life and that sort of thing. How much does this resonate with kind of modern practical psychology, sort of clinical psychology, as you would maybe be prescribed by a doctor, and how much does this veer towards kind of Eastern mythologies or more spiritual alternative therapies? I mean, it's, how much is this kind of proven in medicine? Because I know when you talk about chakras, a lot of people go, okay, here we go. This is, we're going off to kind of woo-woo land now.
Exactly.
But I mean, how much of this is practical, helpful, and how much of this is kind of, a little bit kind of in that kind of spiritual world?
So for me, because I'm very much about a holistic approach, I don't separate and I don't have these judgments, but I appreciate that in the more sort of scientific research field that we want to bring that in. Unfortunately, it really kind of depends on, like, when we look at clinical psychology, it often depends on the body of the clinical psychology, how open they are to different approaches. And that's why on the bridge, I don't tap into chakra stuff. I don't use that language anymore unless I teach that, which I love, right? For me, it's really exciting that in the late sort of 70s, 80s, especially in the 80s, also 90s, and ongoing, there is a whole research medical field that is actually got very interested in the study of trauma. So now we are in the real field of medicine, right? We know that trauma exists. And they really looked into what happens in the body, what happens to the body in trauma. And they expanded the field of trauma in the sense that we say a trauma nowadays in that kind of modalities, right, is sort of defined more by any trigger, is the definition that I like to use. Any trigger that happens too quickly to the mind and the body is too fast and too strong. That causes our neurological system a response in our system.
Okay.
Right?
So kind of fight or flight.
Exactly. Absolutely. The fight and flight and freeze. Yeah. And there's now a fourth one, which is specific to humans, which is fawn. They wanted to have a fourth F, so they call it fawn, which is when we are really, when we are starting to process our trauma by being good to other people, being engaged, overly connected with other people. So codependency and all of that is also often a way of a response to a trauma. Yeah. The human giver syndrome. I read that recently and I love that word very much. Right. So now we are back. We are from woo-woo, hippy-dippy, back into real, right? This is proven stuff, what happens to our system when we get triggered, what we said earlier by the stressor, and what happens to the stress and how we live that stress in the body, through the body, right? And how we need to unlock it.
Yeah.
So most of us, let's imagine this, Chris. So if this definition is true, any trigger, any stressor, any situation, person, or whatever that happens where I experience that in my mind and in my body, in my feeling sense, as something that is too strong, that happens too fast, yeah. And what was the third one? It's too much.
Yeah.
That is too much, right? So before we would say, what would you have told me, or what would most people say about if I ask you, what qualifies for trauma? What would we say?
I mean, it could be anything. Whenever I think about trauma, I always think about something, a terrible incident or a series of incidents that have happened in our past. But I also know that trauma can be an ongoing thing. It can be a very low, just living an unhappy life can be traumatic, but it's not like an abusive relationship, or it's not like a terrible car accident, but it's just low level kind of gradual trauma that works on you over years. A lot of people say, well, I wasn't abused. I didn't have anything terrible happen into my life. What right do I have to be unhappy or depressed or miserable? But it is because life itself can be quite traumatic if we let it grind us down, I think.
Absolutely. And now we come back to the body, and if we don't find a way, sometimes that happens involuntary, often it doesn't, where we find a way of discharging this energy. So often in therapy, in more cognitive therapies, we understand. I really understand what happened to me. I kind of also have a sense of what that maybe have felt like, and I can cry a few tears, and still I don't feel resolved with it. Still I feel depressed, and because then it's worthwhile going and checking in the body. Have you completed the trauma response cycle?
Okay.
Right? Because a lot of us, so we know it's fight, flight, freeze, right? Triggers different nerves. Yeah. So parasympathetic nerve is for the fight and the flight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the sympathetic, I hope I got it right, is for the freeze. So this is common to all mammals. We all do that when we're exposed to danger, when we experience something that could really kill us or could be of severe danger. So now, a lot of us, we get stuck. We get stuck in the cycle. So some people become really angry. They're always fighting. So think about psychologically what that could look like, a raging lunatic. Anything can set him off, right? So it's worthwhile to look into what's happening in his system, what's happened to him.
Yeah.
That he's become like that he's kind of really caught up in a loop there.
I mean, can these blockages be caused by kind of positive feedback as well? So you give an angry response to something and you get your way. So then you learn that the angry response is what gets you the results you want, and it sort of encourages bad behavior. So it's not necessarily a negative reaction to something negative, but it's a kind of learned behavior that has been reinforced by just the outcome that works for you. You get angry, people give you what you want, so you keep getting angry and you keep getting angry. So rather than it being a traumatic thing, it's actually a kind of just a terrible behavior that's been encouraged and grown almost from something much smaller.
Yeah, you can see that often, right, with children that are not set healthy boundaries, and they get reinforced in their anger. They get kind of some validation in their anger, and they get attention through it. Of course, it can then manifest in that way to see, okay, I'm getting my way this way, right?
Yeah.
When you, get sometimes introduced as the queen of anger, right? It's not really a term that I'm so happy about, but I know what it means is that I had a very sort of, what can we say, difficult relationship with anger when I was younger, in the sense of that I was never angry, right?
Okay.
Because it was, never ever. And I would always say, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I was very disassociated from the emotion, because that's what I had to do to be the good girl and all of that in my upbringing. So it was when I did the kind of body related work, and we were looking into, can we find the resonance so we understand now what happened to you, right? And the natural response by the system is to get angry. It's to, the definition that I use on the bridge is, I hope I can get it in my head, is it is a secondary reaction to a perceived injustice. That's what anger is.
Yeah.
Right? In the healthy anger, it's about setting a boundary and saying, I don't like what you're doing. Can you please stop doing it?
Yeah.
Right? And we can say it with a bit of, a bit of oomph, a bit of energy, so the other person really takes us seriously. Yeah. So that is one of the big emotions that often stored in people, right? Where we were not allowed to let that out and to really say, I'm not having my needs met here. Right? Often, I always say, when you look at a very young child, first of all, young children are best to observe in physical response, as we're looking at psychosomatic, how they process. They know how to process their frustrations if we let them. Also, their joy. I mean, you have a 2-year-old at home.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I mean, it is, every day is a roller coaster of emotions all day long. And part of the most tiring thing about having a child is managing your response to that, I think. So you want to nurture them. You don't want to stifle them. But at the same time, you might be able to hear in the background that.
Yeah, I hear it.
Yeah,
very appropriate.
I know. It's dinner time right now, but she can be upset one minute and absolutely overjoyed the next. And it's, as an adult, our emotions don't work that quickly. So we're riding this wave and trying to keep up all the time. And it can be quite stressful and tiring, I don't know how people with 2 or 3 children do it, especially in lockdown situations like we've got at the moment.
I mean, that is really awful. I can only imagine, often in small apartments in London or so, really, really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is the thing. It's such a good example, Chris, is we look at a young child that hasn't been programmed yet, or that hasn't been put into a framework or a template, right? It lives very much in the moment, doesn't it? So 1 minute I want this toy. If I don't have the toy, I throw a tantrum. Yeah. So I process my frustration about an injustice being done to me here. I want that toy. And then a minute later, I see something different and I start laughing and I'm happy because that gives me joy, what I just see, right? So the child processes the frustration very quickly.
And moves on straight away.
So we have that innate in all of us, but we were programmed, no, we don't do that. Don't do that, right? That's not appropriate. That's not how we are in this family. Yeah. How come you're angry? Our feelings get devalued all the time as children. Yeah. Why are you feeling that? Right? There's no need to cry now. Why are you crying now? Nobody asks why you're really crying. They're saying, why are you crying? There's no reason to cry now. So we learn to devalue and, and get out of touch with that sort of natural way of feeling our feelings. And the thing, especially with the more volcanic feelings, like let's say anger, frustration, and so forth, is that they say, but even also sadness and so forth. I think it was CBT even, but don't quote me on it. I'm not 100% sure. But a very established modality. They did some big research around the processing of feelings through the body. Yeah, how long does it take and so forth. And they came up with something like, if you're not sitting on unprocessed old emotion from way, way back, so if you're not stuck in the trauma loop in a way, yeah, you process within 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only when we were talking about anger, when we sit on what we call toxic anger from the past, we need to do catharsis. We need to, so in the therapeutic setup, when we bring in the body, which was your sort of earlier question, is
Yep.
we do first the awareness work. Yeah, it's really important. So that's all the cognitive. And then the second step is that we then start to feel it, yeah. Feeling, often we can't even associate that directly with the body, but I'm beginning to see the tears are coming.
Yeah.
Then we encourage the tears to come, and they come through the body. Right?
And how do you, what kind of physical, is this a breathing exercise? Is it a physical exercise? Is it,
Mhm.
Tai Chi style, energy, movement, that sort of thing?
No, we just all these can help,
Yeah.
right? And especially breathing can help. So breathing, I sometimes do that more in my one-to-one work, in my one-to-one work, when I feel that the person is too much in their head, or
Yeah.
they with entering an emotional state, and you can see it. Once you're trained, you can read the body. I can, it's also, I think, a little bit an innate skill, but also a trained skill, is to look into where are the blockages. So I can
Yeah.
see, so I'm sitting with a person, we've spoken about it, I can often feel their tears, but they not allowing themselves, or they don't know how to access it. And then it's really, we can encourage through the breath, we can encourage to go. It's often a mental resistance.
It's very interesting. This I had a conversation with a woman called Martha Beck. It was one of my favorite conversations that I've done on the podcast, and she is a life coach in America. But she talks about getting into a state of wordlessness, which is this kind of pre-language state of awareness, if you like. And you can do it through meditation. You can do it through lots of different ways. Some people kind of get into flow states, and you're very much in tune with your intuition. And she talks about Polynesian fishermen, and they don't have any navigation tools, but they can navigate their way miles from land, because they know they're in tune with the ocean. They know the ocean so well. And I suppose the similar thing with you. You start to know people's posture, their reaction, almost like it's not even a cognitive thing anymore. You get a feeling for when someone's going to get upset, or where their blockages are, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So on the bridge, when we do, let me just finish this. So we do awareness, and then we do expression. Expression in this kind of setup comes in through what we call catharsis, right? So catharsis, from the Greek word, it means to clean out. So we clean out through the body. Okay. So we look on the bridge, let's say specifically in the first stage, we look at sort of our old anger, right? Frustration that often the people have no idea, right? And that they have, and we have to go against social conditioning here. Oh my God, right? And all what comes to mind says, oh, I'm not angry. And it's, and it's so misunderstood, this emotion. And so then we go into a catharsis, of course, with a lot of explanation and setup. So we want to express this through the body. Yeah. And there I can often see, and Donna often says, well, how do you know? I don't know. It's an innate skill. I can't. So we do use music, we use dance, we use flexibility in the body to access. Okay, we want to get into, as you said, the solar plexus, we want to get into the lower body. This is where our strength, our power is, right? Which is often enmeshed, and, a toxic layer of anger sits over that power, right? So we need to feel it through the body. Yeah. And then so we have music, we have a particular set of movements and so forth, and then the people can also go free, and I see where the blockage is. So then I often go behind, and I start to wake up. I wake up if the person allows me. And then often people say, and they let out a primal scream, or and they say afterwards, oh my God, what happened there? And they think I've done something. I haven't done anything. I've just come in to support what I see already, what I feel already in the body. Yeah. So then afterwards we're very important, so that we then get caught in that cycle. then afterwards we have to bring the nervous system down. So we then go into integration, into relaxation. We use the breath for that a lot, right? And so the thing with anger is that underneath the anger, what's blocking? So we have, let's say we have a lot of pent up frustration. Every time, imagine this, if this definition resonates with you, anger is a secondary reaction to a perceived injustice. Think about in our lives how often we perceive an injustice. Some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller, right? And we swallow them down.
I think it's it's like 5 times a day. Every time you see someone with a nicer car than you, every time you feel like this isn't fair, how come I didn't get the promotion, or why do I have to slog away and go to work every day when I just want to sit on a beach? It's our whole society is built on in this kind of injustice, or this perceived injustice.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you may try to process this through your mind by your judgments and all of that, but does that really help? Probably not. So imagine that part of that energy gets, stored in the body, and you're sitting on all this frustration, this perceived injustice, and you never have an outlet for it. An outlet that can be very messy, right? It can be loud. We are that. We have a primal nature that is often, we are told, that is just not appropriate. We have to behave. We have to think our way through everything. That's not what we do. We don't get messy. We don't get loud. That's what we tell our children when the child throws a tantrum. Yeah. We don't scream. We don't, So now we want to create a safe environment, right? A safe environment, as we would do maybe if I had a child again. I'm still waiting for grandchildren. If I had a child again, I would give a young child much more of a forum to let it out in healthy ways. Of course, we don't want to allow, there must be boundaries, but to let, a child can't be allowed because it's frustrated to kick and scream and bite or whatever children do, right? Or throw things or break things. But to give the child a space where I'm holding the space for you and I'll let you rend it through. I don't say, don't feel that. Don't do that.
Why
you have no reason to be angry. Or try to negotiate her out of it. Let's say she wants this toy. You try to reason her out of wanting the toy. Well, all she does is she feels it through her body.
And she gets angry and tense and kicks around and flails about. Do you think every adult basically accumulates these blockages, and by the time you get to sort of 40 or 50, you might not even be aware of it, but you're essentially physically traumatized by years and years of these kind of injustices not being processed properly?
Absolutely. So that's what I call like a toxic layer that sits actually, and that's why I'm so passionate about the anger work in particular, is because underneath, because it's a volcanic energy, isn't it? And that take out the judgments around it, that it's something bad and destructive and whatever and not cultivated, and we look into, there is a power in it. There is a life power in it, life force we call it. There's a life force that sits underneath the toxic layer of perceived injustices and anger that comes with it. And so when we talk, for example, about depression, right? For me, that's the work that I like to do with people, for them to see and get beyond that toxic belt into their life force, because that's what they deprived of. So then they feel disillusioned with life, hopeless, no energy, lack of energy. So that's where, again, physical comes in. Lack of energy. So I need to go beyond that, into that, what would we call it? Another word for life force, if that's too hippy-dippy.
Just your your life energy, I guess.
Exactly. Or your mojo, you call it that. Your mojo.
Absolutely.
Your passion, right? Your enthusiasm for things, your ability to want to get up and do something.
I mean, do you think it is just the accumulation of baggage, essentially, that weighs us down? I mean, there's the kind of spiritual thinker Muji. He says, you know, step into the fire of self-discovery. It won't
Mm.
burn you, but it'll burn everything you're not. Is that what we're trying to do? We're just
Yeah,
trying to shed
beautiful.
everything that we've accumulated.
Yeah,
over these-
beautiful. Yeah, beautifully said. That's what it is. So we need to do that through the body, because the mind is often our worst enemy with it.
Yeah,
And I can't, Chris, sometimes on retreats, when we like a bridge and other retreats I used to teach before, and we go and we say to people, okay, now we need to kind of wake up the system a bit,
yeah,
right? We're not even talking about psychology and wounding and all of that. Let's just move the body. And how many people, and we put on some nice tunes and we say, just move your body to the rhythm. And it's just, sometimes it is shocking to me to see how unable people are to
yeah.
loosely move in their bodies. If there's no particular dance steps or,
I think that would be me. I'd probably just stand in the corner looking very awkward.
yes.
But I've heard of a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, and every morning before he starts work, he turns off the lights, goes into his living room, and he puts on his stereo as loud as he can, and he just does what he calls ecstatic dance, and he just shakes it all out, shakes his limbs, bounces around the room, just does it for one song, and then he starts his day, and he almost like feels kind of like it's a reset,
Mm.
almost. Do you think it's something we can do? Do you think this is why people get into kind of physical exercise and things like that? Is that a similar release, or is that an alternative escape, or is it
Maybe
something
a
that's
bit of
equally as effective?
possibly of all of that,
Yeah,
depending what's true for you. I always say that, I mean, I'm all for that kind of body consciousness movement, and people going to the gym and they're doing their work and they want to look good and it's healthy and great.
yeah,
But what I often say, in this therapeutic setup where we potentially want to release stuck up emotion, and that can also be grief and sadness and all of that, not only anger, but also joy.
yeah,
Some people, they can't feel joy, right? So what I always say, in this kind of approach, we want to really let go of the mind ruling the
yeah,
movement. When I go to the gym, it's the mind, or in often also in yoga, when it shouldn't be, it's am I doing it right? And so it's the mind saying we need to do it right today. We've practiced this. So it's still the mind ruling the movement.
yeah,
So in ecstatic dance, if you bring that up, for some people it's like, oh my God, hippy dippy.
yeah,
Yeah, but this is what the hippies did, because they went to the Far East, where this is very old, ingrained practices that nobody judges, right? And so it's all about letting the body speak, letting the
yeah.
body do the movement, and not the mind ordering the body to do the movement, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are those videos, aren't there, from the ashrams, with full of hippies in the 1970s, all just shaking around like they're possessed,
Yeah.
And that makes me think as well. You talked about catharsis, and I immediately thought of Dionysus and the Bacchus,
Mm.
who were supposed to be these kind of possessed people just exploring, and you called it a kind of a cleansing almost.
Mhm.
But with Dionysus, it was wine and dance and indulgence. Do you think this is why people turn to alcohol, because they're seeking some sort of release, but they just don't know what it is, and so
Mm.
it can be easily channeled into something much more dangerous
Mm.
than a healthy therapeutic approach? Some people turn to the bottle to
Yeah.
deal with their unexpressed emotions.
Absolutely, because it takes the lid off a little bit, where I'm not allowing myself, when I'm sober, I'm not allowing myself, or I don't even know how to do it. And it takes that filter off, the alcohol or other drugs and so
Yeah,
forth, right? And then suddenly, because the movement is innate in the body, the wish to release is innate in the body
yeah,
and in the feeling sense, right? Which the two go together, emotion and body, they go together. Yeah. So the shaking, I can't not have this conversation without mentioning the shaking,
yeah,
because that is a life changer, and uh, it has a very neurological, physiological purpose.
mm,
And then we can make it into hippy dippy, and we can make it into whatnot. But what happens is when we are caught in a danger loop of fight, flight, freeze, yeah, in that cycle, it's been studied that all mammals have an innate, so when let's say I go into, first the gazelle is chased by the lion. So what does the gazelle do first? It goes into flight. It doesn't maybe go into fight because it knows that it doesn't have doesn't stand a chance. So it goes in, it moves, it has a lot of energy to move away from the danger. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the lion chases, and sure enough, the lion gets his teeth, fangs, whatever you call it, into the gazelle's hip. So now the trauma response, very clever. It puts a brake onto the adrenaline and the cortisol released in the flight. It puts a full brake on. We go full brake, and the gazelle goes to the ground and it freezes. Right? Yeah. I mean, this is a massive, massive break. Yeah. And the heartbeat is going from the running and everything. And suddenly the mammal is able to really go to a almost complete standstill to fool the lion.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. With the hope, or not a conscious hope, you know what I mean, a mental, but it's an instinctual hope that maybe if it pretends to be dead, the lion will just sort of drag it somewhere and so forth, and it has a chance to get up again, yeah. Right? Or the lion will remove itself when it gets out of danger. So now what happens, because I'm still coming back to the shaking, what now was observed and studied in the 80s by Peter Levine, you may have heard the way, he's a really great trauma researcher. Yeah? So they did a lot of studies in the animal kingdom, and they saw what all mammals do is when they come out of the freeze, yeah, they shake, right? So the brake suddenly comes off. I'm out of danger. I'm lucky. I haven't been eaten for whatever reason. Comes out of the freeze. The motor skills in the body set in again. And what it does to discharge this energy, right, of the immobilization is it begins to shake. Right?
Literally loosening up the muscles.
Yeah,
cleansing exactly. Out all the kind of
to get out of that stuck. That stuck brake is on. Suddenly, I go from movement, lots of movement, into complete standstill. So it shakes. Yeah. And then it takes some, as I say, it's instinctual, of course. It's some breath, deep breath, and then it runs off and it's out of danger and it's survived, if it was lucky enough to do that. So now then they looked and they said, so if all mammals do that, and we also mammals, what's our version of that?
Yep.
And what they found is, because we are not instinctual anymore, most of us, sometimes we have involuntary shaking reactions. Maybe you've had that at night where your legs twitch, or you sit somewhere and you're starting to twitch, and then we're told, don't do that, and then, I get so reactive over that because it's a natural discharge response of the body. Okay. So because we're not that instinctual anymore, we've not learned, we've forgotten how to get out of the trauma response. So now the shaking, and we do a lot of shaking on the bridge, after each deep emotional healing piece of work, which may cognitive, emotional, and all of that, we always do shaking. And not hippy dippy shaking, but literal, you can go on YouTube. Yeah. The bioenergetic movement, if you put in bioenergetics and shaking, you have clips there and they explain it and so forth, and they show how it works. And that in itself, and it takes only a few minutes when you so in depression, for example, I would look with people to look, are you somewhere caught in the trauma response on the freeze cycle? Yeah. This can be from all the way back. Let's say a person sexually abused, goes children in physical abuse and sexual abuse often go into freeze. They disassociate. Again, that's what we do as humans, but they are caught in a freeze, and they continue to be in the freeze for their whole life. And they wonder why they're depressed. They can't really get their life going, right?
Yeah.
They still fantasize, they still disassociate because they're not safe. They never felt safe, right?
I mean, how do we know to seek out this trauma? I mean, when you're talking about physical things and you're having these manifestations of some sort of physical problem, how do you know that it's not an illness or a virus, or you've got a stomach bug, for example? How do you know it's deeper than that? I mean, are there going to be other things, sort of a deeper malaise that you're kind of not facing up to, that is always there, and a deeper unhappiness or something like that, nervousness, anxiety? Is that normally along with it as well?
First of all, of course, you go and you have yourself checked,
Yeah.
So when as I said, I started having migraines when I was 14. And of course, my dad took me to the doctors, and they're looking, and they have it all checked that there is nothing, no tumor, no whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And then luckily it wasn't the case, and again, continuously, ever so often, I would be sent to the doctor, and I would try to see if there is actually a pathological illness here, right? And it wasn't. And then, so let's say I'm a person, for whatever reason, and I don't need to know, I process everything psychosomatically. So luckily, I've never really, until I hit menopause, I've never really experienced depression. I never really mood swings or these kind of things. So psychologically, I've always been pretty kind of stable, but physiologically is a very different situation. So some people, they process naturally much more psychologically first, so their symptoms are psychological, but we then go back and we look into, okay, so you're telling me whatever, your mother didn't love you, she couldn't give you love, she had whatever postnatal depression, right? And your father was absent, and you were always kind of, making some sort of, so this is psychological experience, okay? So you're sharing that with me. We mirror that, we validate that, we get to the bottom, and we also ask, what do we imagine? How was that for you as a child, and so forth? And then we look into, and then we slowly, in the therapy, we come in to say, how may the body have experienced that?
Yeah.
So where did you get stuck in fight, right? So some children, they become very naughty and they become fighters, right? So they try to defend themselves from feeling and so forth by always being outwardly fighting. So we understand that, and we look into, so where do we feel that in the body? Again, we're back to that. How can we loosen that? How can we loosen that feeling of the constant, that behavior pattern of the fight, right? Or the flight, where someone is always on the run and they there but not there. They may be passive aggressive, right? Maybe they can't commit in their lives. So this is a psychological level.
Yeah.
Right? Then we understand where that comes from. So we understand the story. Then we go into the catharsis, and we say, we look, where could it be a resonance in the body, and how can I loosen that? How can I get that out? Yeah. And then the same for the freeze. A lot of people nowadays are, in my own experience, are stuck in freeze.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then we have to look, okay, because the body has a beautiful wisdom. The mind has sometimes a tendency to complicate things, right? We can say that.
Absolutely.
So if I always say with all of this, I say there's two reasons for wanting to do some kind of, maybe exploring some kind of somatic work, right? One is that that you are too caught up in your mind.
Yeah.
Too much in your head. Yeah. And you feel exhausted by it because you're going around in circles, okay, by overthinking. And so that is one reason to start, just to get yourself out of the mind. We're not even looking at trauma, right? We are looking at just getting out of our heads a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, this is a modern syndrome, isn't it? I mean, even if you've had a brilliant life and everything's worked out for you, we're living in a very unnatural world. You know, we're following man-made routines, Monday to
Mm-hmm.
Friday, 9 to 5. We're kind of shoehorning ourselves into office environments which are no way at all natural. So there is going to be some kind of trauma of expectation as well, of, you know, where we need to be in life, all of this kind of stuff. So I guess as part of a healthy life, you need to embrace this kind of some sort of therapeutic activity like this
Yeah.
anyway,
Mhm.
just to keep yourself functioning well and
Mm.
being aligned with who you're supposed to be.
Yeah. And being fully alive, that's what it is, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we look at social media and we look at all of that is head based, all of
yeah,
that is sort of neck up,
yeah,
right? So when then and now look at corona and lockdowns and so forth, so we even more forced into the sort of home office. We don't even have the way to the office now where we would move naturally our bodies, right? So we're doing everything from home, we're staring at screens the whole day, right? And then we kind of sit at in the evening in front of the telly or whatever, or best case at the table having a lovely meal with your family, but still in the head talking
yeah,
about rational stuff. And then we go to bed and then we start again.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And we're just building up, building up, building up. Yeah,
exactly. And we get ourselves, overstimulation. I mean, I've been in this work for quite a number of years and I explored a lot, a lot of stuff, obviously, when I was younger for myself in my own therapy and my own exploration. I've never seen so many people come to the work with anxiety and panic attacks.
yeah,
It's shocking to me, Chris. It's really shocking to me. And why is that? So forget about that there may be underlying trauma, right? Maybe not. It may just simply be because you're not moving your body. You're not really engaging your nervous system in different activity than just thought,
yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I
Huh?
mean, we are just channeled in, aren't we, all the time to screens and
Yeah,
expectations and targets and to-do lists, and it's just pressure and all focused in on a very small space. It's very, very out of alignment with where we're supposed to be, I
yeah,
guess, at the moment.
yeah,
Um, Talking of that, I'm very aware, talking of COVID and lockdown and that kind of thing, I'm very aware that I've taken up quite a bit of your time already. But in terms of, if people are interested in this and finding a way to explore it, if they can't come to the Bridge Retreat, which is www.thebridgeretreat.com, isn't it? Is there somewhere where people can start to explore this for themselves and to find out more about how to unblock themselves, and look into this? Where's a good place to start, do you think?
we can start with what we were just criticizing, which is with the kind of mind where we go, as I said, YouTube is really great. If you put in sort of bioenergetics,
Yeah,
if you put in somatic experiencing, right? TRE is another one, right? Trauma release exercises, and you don't have to have experienced severe trauma. These are
yeah,
kind of physical exercise that go along the notion what I said, where I'm not willing my body to do something to look good or become fitter, and nothing
yeah,
wrong with that, but where it's really some innate exercises that help us to really bring the nervous system down, to
yeah,
discharge first, right? And so, yeah, to look online. Then there are actually, I put a few books out there. There is a few books that give you also, actually, we didn't talk much about trauma that much, actually. So maybe they're not so I like this one here. I've recently got that one.
which one
This
is that
is
one?
really good. It's called Burnout. Brené Brown, she did a podcast on
Oh yeah,
this.
yeah,
Um, Solve Your Stress Cycles. And so, of course, they talk a lot about trauma, but they also talk about really how to get our nervous system to calm down, to get
yeah,
down, right? And they have some really practical tips in there. Maybe this is the one. The others are a little bit more So really on the trauma cycle. And then look at the exercises and see what you're drawn to, and then just do it. And it's the regularity of it. So with the shaking, that's another reason why I like the shaking, is because I've actually did a few minutes of shaking just before coming on this. I've never done a podcast, and then so mentally I was all fine. It's a topic that I really know well, and I could talk forever about it. I think you get the idea, you know. But I felt, see, here we go. So I checked in with myself. And I could feel a little bit of a nervousness because I don't know you. I don't know. So I have a very sensitive, nervous makeup, right? I'm a little bit often, I used to be compared to like a deer. She makes her quick, sort of, run over the meadow and then she disappears again, right? So I need to be really, it's about sort of my psychological and mental hygiene in a way, or my physical hygiene, I call it, to see, and I noticed I was a bit nervous, fear of the unknown. I don't know you, I don't know how this is going to go. So I felt it wasn't a big response, it wasn't overwhelming, but I could feel it. So I just shook myself. I actually have a trampoline, also a small one, for whole, indoor use. So I went on there and I just discharged the energy. And that's what it is. And then I breathe and I felt calmer. So it doesn't have to be an elaborate practice even.
No. Yeah? I mean, I've seen people before they go on stage, for example, using trampolines and jumping up and down. Yeah. I think you can hear my daughter. She's doing her own ecstatic release at the moment. But yeah, I think that's, I mean, it's a good way. I mean, it's a good way to kind of get yourself ready for any kind of slightly stressful situation, and recognize that stress and then shake it off.
To get the nervous system automatic, because the shaking is a very innate movement that we all know. Because if you think about it, it's more a rocking notion, but it resembles a form of shaking. Is when you're in a mother's womb, you always moved in a way, right? Then we have the baby and we go and we calm the baby by by going and doing that. So that's naturally a shake that is innate in us. So we need to continue to use that feeling to discharge, right? So can I just say, because I feel it's really important. Where's my note? I don't want to miss out something here. For people, maybe for listeners to say, so what do I do with this? So one is the shaking, or any physical exercise actually done consciously. So I used to go for a run. I don't run anymore. I do it for a walk, right? I even sometimes put something in. We used to put a Post-it sticker where I would write down, furious with so-and-so, pisses me off or something. Write that on a Post-it, put in my shoe, run it off. When I have the focus, that's what I'm doing. That's my intention. So again, we bring mind and body together.
So it has to be intentional.
It makes it more powerful. It doesn't have to. Any body movement will innately, because the body knows what to do, but it makes it more powerful because it brings in the mind. I'm conscious, I'm focused, right, of what I'm doing. That is one thing. So we need to learn to self-regulate what we do it. So it's found out that human connection really also helps us to calm down the nervous system. Right? It's innate in us. So again, we say the hippies, they knew a few things because these prolonged hugs. So they've done again research around, what gets the nervous system to calm down. The autonomic nervous system is a 20-second. I was about to say 20 minute, 20-second. Heart-to-heart hug.
Okay.
Right? So no, it's not the English quick. Right?
So it's proper bear hug.
Proper, and we can go. I sometimes do that, my husband has mellowed with the years, sometimes I go, after a stressful day, seeing quite a lot of people, and I feel like a bit sort of, unresourced, and I just go and I just really surrender into that hug. There's no demand, there's no
expectation or anything like that.
Expectation or anything. So that is proven. That is not some hippy-dippy stuff, Then the next thing is to create safety and stability in your environment. To do that. Creativity. Yeah, if you want to be more in touch with, out of this, into do something with your hands, very important. And there was one more, I have to look it up. What was it? Laughter.
Okay. Right? I mean, is that actual finding something funny and laughing, or is it
real laughter? It's not
the real laughter.
Polite, yeah. So it's really finding something. I'm so easy, I'm so I'm so transparent, or what do you call it? Just talking about it, I could tap into a real laughter now, which is not even hooked on something that I experience as really funny right now.
Yeah. So I mean, so we're talking about getting physical. So either that's shaking or some sort of physical exercise with the intention of release.
Yeah.
You've got laughter, you've got doing something creative, getting into that kind of flow state of creativity, and then that physical connection, that hug or something.
Connection, right? Heart to heart, without demand, without something where you feel
just release and therapeutic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so often, of course, my heart reaches out to all those people who are in lockdown and they don't have anybody around, right?
Yeah.
You can then see, I just come up with that. You can then, if you find yourself in that situation where there is not a person that is safe enough for you to do that real heart-to-heart 20-second connection, or you're all by yourself, look up on YouTube a technique, a trauma technique called heavening, like to have, right? Then ning. So this is actually this. Who was it? Justin Bieber or somebody. Apparently he's using that technique. He had some therapy, hasn't he?
Just a kind of soothing exercise.
So it's a self-soothing. So if you don't have anybody, look it up. This is not this is proven. Proven to really calm the nervous system.
I suppose the vagus nerve, you have nerves that run down your arms and all that kind of stuff, which is also connected to your heart. So you have your kind of blood pressure going on there as well. And to your stomach as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, if it feels right, you can also use some positive affirmations. Like, this too shall pass. This is one of my mantras now, right? At the moment, that I tell myself.
This too shall pass,
This too shall pass, right? And we will be able to live our lives again, however we choose to live it. I don't want to think we want to go back as it was, but right.
But I think we get a choice, don't we, to create our own new normal or whatever that's going to look like coming out of it.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm gonna end there. You can probably hear
you're going.
Quite loud in the background.
Process through her body.
I know we're in lockdown now, so we're at home with a 2-year-old child, and it's bath time and juggling all of that kind of stuff. So so that's kind of my bell has been rung now by my little daughter. But this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so grateful for your time. I certainly, a lot of this has resonated with me, and I'm going to try and be much more aware of myself physically in different situations. How am I responding to different things? How do things feel when I'm feeling stressed? How do they physically feel? And then sort of explore that and find out ways to at least read it and read myself, I think. So I'm ever so grateful. And I will also put links to Brené Brown's book and to the Bridge Retreat on the website as well. So if anyone...
It's not from Brené Brown.
Oh, it's not from Brené Brown?
It's called Emily and Amelie Nagoski. They are PhD, but she has done a podcast with the two ladies on that book. But if you look it up, it's because it's pretty new. So it pops up easily if you put it into the machine.
Fantastic. Well, that's excellent. Well, I encourage people not to put too much into the machine, because I think that's where a lot of our problems are coming from.
Absolutely.
But no, well, thank you so much for giving up your time today. I really appreciate it. And I feel like we could have gone on for... there's so much we could have explored here. But my little girl is calling me, so I'd better...
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a wonderful conversation with Gabi Krueger there from the Bridge Retreat. That's www.thebridgeretreat.com. It felt bad to cut it short, but we're all living in lockdown situations at the moment, and it was bath time for my little girl, so I had to go and help out with that. So hope you forgive me for that. But this is life, I guess. This is how it is for many millions of us around the world at the moment, trying to juggle home with work, with hobbies, with trying to kind of create some sense of normalcy. I found it fascinating what Gabi was saying. We really need to listen to our bodies and listen to what's going on inside us, whether that's physical, whether that's emotional, and understand where we are constricting ourselves and where in our bodies that is showing up. We've got a lot of great podcasts lined up. I've got one coming up soon about how we can use movement, natural movement, to get back to our natural selves. I've got a podcast coming up with Trudy Goodman, one of the leading Buddhist teachers in America. She's the founder of Insight LA. I'm talking to experts about how we can find practical steps. Doesn't matter if you're spiritual or if you're not. It's just practical things you can do to get more organized, get more fulfillment out of life, how to have a more rewarding and content life based on practical things you can do. I'm also talking about how we can use gaming, like computer gaming, as a tool for well-being. So I've got a few really interesting podcasts lined up, and I hope you join me for those. And in the meantime, like I said, you can download my book for free on my website. That's Shine Manifesto at www.chrisbrock.uk. Please subscribe, rate this podcast, tell your friends about it. I hope you enjoy it. I put a lot of love into this, and I get a lot out of it myself. I consider this therapy, and I love doing what I'm doing. So spread the word. Get other people to listen to it and see what they think as well. Doing it from my bedroom right now, as a lot of people are. We're having to, carry on our work lives from kitchen tables, from sofas, from bedrooms all around the world right now, as we can't travel anymore. But there's something liberating about being able to reach out around the world and speak to really fascinating, interesting people who are carving out niches for themselves and taking ownership of our lives, which is what this podcast is all about. So yes, so thank you for listening. Download my book, chrisbrock.uk, or buy the paperback. It's lovely on Amazon. And thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.